Whether it's a tragic love story, a secret obsession, or a paranoid urge, each and every one of these buildings built by the rich and reckless has a bizarre origin story. One of the most famous examples is when William Randolph Hearst had originally intended the Hurst Castle abode as a family home for his wife and their sons, but he ended up using it for a much more scandalous purpose. But we'll go back to that later. Mad King Ludwig II of Bavaria was a recluse, somewhat unhinged, and had tons of money at his disposal. So he made the beautiful, daunting Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany his beloved brainchild. Ludwig was obsessed with the mythical operas of Richard Wagner and built the castle as a shrine to the nationalistic composer. Accordingly, the king designed all the architecture and decor in a medieval style. Neuschwanstein's romantic architecture inspired Disneyland's famous Sleeping Beauty Castle. Ludwig wrote to Wagner and dropped the not-so-subtle hint that he wanted Wagner to stay in the castle with him as a cherished friend. Sadly, it was all doomed to a heartbreaking end. Wagner died in 1883 and never actually visited Ludwig's monument to him. In the end, Mad King Ludwig went down with his castle. Frustrated with their king's unhinged, irresponsible spending, the Bavarian government deposed him in the summer of 1886. In an ironic twist, he had only been living in his beloved castle for a mere 172 days when they came to take him into custody. A Bavarian official named Bernhard von Guden and his men dragged Ludwig kicking and screaming from his palace on June 11, 1886, and secured him in the nearby Berg Castle. Shockingly, just 2 days later, both von Guden and Ludwig were both dead. They went for an evening walk on June 13th and never returned. What happened? Well, when attendants found the men's bodies, they were floating in the shallow waters of Berg Castle's lake. To this day, no one knows how exactly they got there. They may have drowned, but this seems unlikely. Another more disturbing theory suggests that enemies shot at Ludwig, with von Guden getting caught in the crossfire. Either way, it was a dark ending for the fairy tale king. For a time, Sarah Winchester had it all. She was married to firearm magnate William Winchester, she had a new baby, and they had a lot of money on the east coast of America. Then, one day, it all came crashing down. By 1881, Sarah's husband died of tuberculosis, and her baby had wasted away from the childhood illness marasmus. Grieving, lost, and rich, Lady Winchester reportedly went to a medium for guidance, and got some strange advice that changed her life forever. According to some sources, the clairvoyant told Sarah Winchester that she was actually being haunted by all the victims of her husband's rifles. Even more bizarrely, the medium told Winchester that she had to travel west and perpetually build a mansion to house both herself and the spirits who were haunting her. For almost 38 years, Sarah continuously built up Winchester Mansion at 525 South Winchester Road, with different rooms, hallways, staircases, stained glass windows, alcoves, and the like. Construction was so frantic that inside the house, there are even stairs that go nowhere and windows uselessly overlooking other rooms. Many people believe that the mansion's twisting insides were meant to keep the vengeful ghosts confused, and Winchester went to great lengths to defend herself. The whole house only had one working bathroom for Sarah herself. The rest acted as decoys to keep the ghosts off her scent. Sarah also insisted on sleeping in a different bedroom every night, living in fear that specters would finally catch up to her. Winchester died on September 5th, 1922, with many parts of her desperate house still unfinished. To this day, there are rooms in the Winchester Mystery House that no member of the public has ever seen, and perhaps never will. Though Colorado is better known for its high mountains and deep forests, it also has its very own castle, and an eccentric mind to go with it. Bishop Castle, just off Highway 165, is named after its creator, Jim Bishop. Sure, it's got all the strange rooms and medieval architecture you'd expect of a castle, but it also has a bizarre history. Jim Bishop was a blunt, loud, and tough-talking man who transformed a proposed cottage into a towering oddity. But when he and his wife were both diagnosed with cancer in 2014-2015, his friend David Merrill committed the ultimate betrayal. After the Bishops made him a trustee of their house, Merrill went and turned it into a church. The outspoken Bishops were not pleased and spent the next few years both battling cancer and trying to get Merrill's name off the lease. At the turn of the century, infamous Latvian Edward Leeds Kalnin got rejected by his 16-year-old fiancée the day before their wedding. Well, Edward dealt with this in a perhaps understandable way. He fled to America to lick his wounds, and then got really into occult construction. According to Leeds Kalnin himself, he contracted tuberculosis on the way over to America from Latvia, but miraculously healed himself. Leeds Kalnin started to work on what we now know as Coral Castle, which is where things got very creepy very fast. Leeds Kalnin purchased land in the then super remote Florida city. While working on the castle, he demanded to build all of it with his own hands, by himself, and refused to let anyone see his work. According to the eyewitness accounts, Leeds Kalnin somehow got the blocks of coral he was building with to float. Though many people asked, Leeds Kalnin never told anyone how he had built the castle by himself. He only admitted to using a perpetual motion holder. Sometimes when visitors pressed him to reveal his construction secrets, he apparently only shrugged and said, "It's not difficult if you know how." Leeds Kalnin actually once moved the whole castle, yes, the whole thing, from Florida City to near Miami. He was apparently fed up with people trying to sneak in and find out his secrets, so he picked up and moved the whole kit and caboodle in order to protect his well-guarded occult methods. Leeds Kalnin called his original structure in Florida City Ed's Place, a shockingly original and innovative name. Moreover, though we now call the final structure Coral Castle, Leeds Kalnin originally named the second location Rock's Gate. Whenever anyone asked Leeds Kalnin why he had decided to so suddenly build this castle, he'd always respond that it was for his Sweet 16. Though many experts now believe this was a reference to his teenaged ex-fiancée and his unrequited love for her, no one has ever figured out the truth for sure. The Waldorf Astoria in New York. Underneath the hotel's exterior lies a dark, dirty history. The original Waldorf Astoria was actually two separate hotels, the Waldorf and the Astoria, and they came out of a bitter family feud. In the late 19th century, wealthy realtor William Waldorf Astor had an old mansion just lying around on 5th Avenue and 33rd Street in Manhattan, so he decided to construct a hotel instead. He was ticked with his Aunt Caroline Astor, who just so happened to own the mansion next to his. Of course, once he actually built the Waldorf, things got even more interesting. When the Waldorf Hotel first opened, high society New Yorkers absolutely despised it and actively laughed at it. Dyed-in-the-wool Manhattanites thought the tacky behemoth really brought down the neighborhood, and its excessive number of bathrooms earned it the scornful nickname Astor's Folly. The specifics of William's feud with Aunt Caroline are straight out of the Spoiled Rich Kids playbook. Waldorf's wife Mary and his Aunt Caroline were actually locked in a battle of wills about who could use the illustrious title of Mrs. Astor in high society. The Waldorf opened its sleek doors in March 1893 and eventually became the toast of New York society, until Waldorf's cousin and rival, John Jacob Astor IV, started trying to build his own Astoria hotel right next door. Naturally, this hotel was even bigger, with more rooms and an even more ornate ballroom. Luckily, the family worked out their differences and soon made provisions to create the conjoined Waldorf Astoria of today. These days, the terrifying Vlad the Impaler, the supposed inspiration for Dracula, is synonymous with blood, terror, and impaling a lot of people on stakes. But while rebuilding his Poenary castle in Romania, Vlad supposedly forced women and children to take part in the construction, or else face execution. Sun King Louis XIV not only put more and more power into his own hands, he also turned the Palace of Versailles from a hunting lodge into an architectural spectacle. The gardens of Versailles are world famous, but in its heyday as a royal residence, the palace blooms smelled so strongly they apparently made guests sick to their stomach. When Louis XIV built the exquisite Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, he had to tempt away Venetian glassmakers, a move that greatly angered Venice, who wanted to have a monopoly on glassmaking. In a disturbing bid to keep their secrets, the Venetian government actively spied on their workers and threatened them with bodily harm if they ever spilled the beans to outsiders. The main dining hall in Versailles was so enormous that during big dinners, the servants couldn't even walk from the kitchen to King Louis XIV's seat without his food getting cold. Notorious killer and con artist H.H. Holmes had something of an entrepreneurial streak in him. When he set up his hunting grounds during the lead up to the 1983 World's Fair in Chicago, Holmes started building the pleasant little lodge we know today as the Murder Castle. Unfortunately, the structure is even more horrific than its name. Holmes bought the lot for his dark venture in 1887 and claimed he wanted to use it as a hotel for the upcoming fair. He quickly hired multiple builders and developers, only to steal their materials for his own use, and then claim that he had misplaced them. That way, no one knew what was going on in that building. Until 1894, when investigators searched it and found a house of horrors. The true extent of Holmes's villainy was immediately evident once people got a look at his castle. He had soundproof rooms, maze-like hallways, and false walls leading to secret passageways. Those early investigators were utterly shocked at what they uncovered. Among the most chilling features were chutes that plummeted down to a basement filled with vats of acid and airtight rooms into which he could pump noxious gas. To this day, no one knows how many of his victims perished within the castle's walls. When burgeoning business tycoon and eccentric billionaire William Randolph Hearst inherited the humble plot of land in San Simeon, where his family used to go glamping, he commissioned architect Julia Morgan to build something a little more comfortable up on the hill. She certainly did. The result was today's infamous Hurst Castle. William Randolph Hearst had originally intended the humble Hurst Castle abode as a family home for his wife Millicent and their sons, but he ended up using it for a much more scandalous purpose. By 1925, he and Millicent were married only in name, and Hearst took up with his longtime notorious mistress, the actress Marion Davies. Suddenly, Hurst Castle was the destination place for Hollywood. The illicit power couple hosted the likes of Cary Grant and Charlie Chaplin at their parties. Hurst Castle was under almost constant construction. Even as Hearst and Davies hosted their famous parties, Julia Morgan was building ever more extensions, rooms, theaters, tennis courts, swimming pools, and guest houses. One art dealer called Hearst the Great Accumulator, and he more than lived up to the name. Even as a young boy, he was an obsessive collector, and Hurst Castle became his enormous display case. He bought antiques, textiles, you name it, all on a massive scale, and wanted to make Hurst Castle a museum of things that I can secure. Hurst and his mighty castle were the focus of Orson Welles' classic movie, Citizen Kane. In the film, Hurst Castle is appropriately renamed Xanadu. Not everyone was a fan of the film, though. Hurst himself despised the portrayal and worked tirelessly to get the film banned from Hollywood. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. We'd really appreciate it. We also invite you to check out the companion article in the description below. If you want to see even more videos on historical figures, please subscribe to the channel.